So the latest wave of Labrynth support has just arrived in Master Duel. Or should I say, legs. So if you're a competitive Yu-Gi-Oh player, you're probably pretty familiar with this art type already. And if you're not, you're gonna really need to get acquainted quite quickly. Because this art type, it's going to be everywhere. It's guaranteed to be a top tier deck list, and it's basically already shown a whole bunch of really insane results in both the TCG and the OCG, even winning a YCS recently.
Tom guckt sich das Ganze jetzt erstmal an. Da ist der Eradicator direkt.
Oh, direkt hinten dran! Schlag! Okay, und jetzt gucken wir uns die Hand an von Tom. Wie viele Zauberkarten sind darin? Eine Nerf, ein Flash, ein
Prosperity! Kleine Gräber muss direkt passen! Arianna, das ist der Hit!
Yeah, I said it was a good deck list. I didn't promise it wasn't incredibly toxic.
Fair point, yeah.
I know that feeling.
Oh, look at that. He's just spreading his hand under the table. Classic Sat 5 by Yomo.
Applause from the crowd.
And the
We
crowd
love it.
is loving it. They're celebrating the classic ultimate Sat 5, but there's
No, she shakes her hand! Jessica!
So here's today's deck list. Now just a reminder before getting to the deck list, if you guys are enjoying today's video and want to see more content just like this in the future, especially if you're a returning viewer, so apparently about 35% of you watching this or even subscribed to the channel, means 65% of you haven't even clicked that button yet. So if you guys are enjoying this content and will see more videos just like this in the future, especially around the latest selection pack, as of a whole bunch of videos planned, including Dark World, maybe Magic Key, Trap Trick, a whole bunch of other videos just planned around all the new cards from that pack. So if you want to see any of those videos, remember to leave a like on this video and consider subscribing down below so you don't miss out. Alright, let's jump into this deck list. Alright, so what is new in Labrynth? Well, Labrynth has gotten itself a couple of really impactful Ultra Rares for the deck list, both of which are just as important as each other, and have actually sort of warped how this deck list plays, making it slightly different from before, and I'll explain that in just a second. So the first one is going to be your Lady Labrynth of the Silver Castle. This card is incredibly strong, because first of all, it's a 3000 attack, 2900 defense monster that is going to be basically always untargetable and also always going to be unable to be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. Because while you control a set card, your opponent cannot target this card with card effects and it cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. And you're playing a trap deck. Your entire back row is always going to be set, so this card is always going to be basically immune to any sort of targeting or any sort of destruction effects, making it a really powerful boss monster on its own that's really hard for your opponent to get rid of. And that's not even the best part about the card. If a Labrynth card or effect of a normal trap card was activated this turn, you can special summon this card as a quick effect. And keep in mind, this can be if your opponent activates a trap card, or if your opponent activates a Labrynth effect. You can just summon this thing straight out from your hand. And also keep in mind, it doesn't have to be used in response to that trap card's effect, or in response to a Labrynth effect. It can be used at any point during your turn after that trap effect has gone off. So for example, during your main phase, you can activate one of your special summonable trap cards, or whatever it is, just special summon out a Labrynth from your deck list. And then during the end phase, if this thing's in your hand, you can special summon it to the field. I'm not sure why you do it in that order, but that's just an example for example. Alright, and the last effect, which is arguably the most important effect, is when a normal trap card is activated, you can set one normal trap card with a different name directly from your deck. And that is any trap card in the game. Literally any trap card, which is very important, and it's why I said this is sort of warped the playstyle of how this deck list works compared to the old variant, because this card can search for any of the counter cards in the entirety of the game, depending on what matchups you're facing. So for example, a very popular card in Labrynth now, and something I'll expect to see in every single Labrynth build, is going to be Dimensional Barrier. Because you can now search for a card that is able to deal with Rituals, Fusions, Synchro, Exceed, or Pendulum. You can just search for this card. And another cool thing about Labrynth is we have a searchable Labrynth Cooclock, which is going to be able to allow you to use this card on the turn you set it. So during your opponent's turn, you can activate your Lady Labrynth, grab this thing from your deck, then activate your Cooclock, activate this card immediately, and your opponent can't use any of those types that we just said, depending on what you're up against. So generally you wait for your opponent to use their first card so you know what they're playing. If you find out they're playing Branded, you can select Fusion. If you find out they're playing Marine Cess, then you're screwed because this can't actually deal with Link monsters. But if you find out your opponent's playing, I know, Sword Soul, you can choose Synchro. Basically anything this card can sort of deal with. On top of that, if you're up against sort of a runic deck list, or some sort of deck list that plays a billion spell cards, you can search for your Eradicator Epidemic Virus, which upon activation, as you guys know, tributes one of your 2500 attack monsters, or whatever it is. Then nuke every single spell card or trap card your opponent has in their hand or on the field until their, like, third turn. So this card just It just deals with basically all spell and trap cards, no matter what they're playing, until their third turn. It's incredibly strong against any trap card focused deck or any spell card focused deck list. And that's just basically how this deck list functions now. If you have this card on the field, you search for the counter card, and your opponent can't play the game. Alright, on top of that, we have another brand new ultra rare, being Big Welcome Labrynth. This card allows you to special summon one Labrynth monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard, then return one monster from you control to the hand, which isn't that big of a deal, because you can activate it, grab your boss monster, slam it on the field, return it to your hand, and it can then just summon itself whenever you feel like it. On top of that, there's a lot of Labrynth effects you want to add back to your hand. For example, this card, if you add it back to your hand, you can then normal summon it later or special summon it later, and you'll get its search effect off, so you actually kind of like the fact this thing has a bounce on it. Alright, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one Fiend monster you control, or if you control a level 8 or higher Fiend monster, you can target one card your opponent controls instead, return that target to your hand, or to the hand. And keep in mind, this thing when it's in the graveyard, it can be used during your opponent's turn, just as a removal to bounce link your opponent has. But very important, you can only use one Big Welcome Labrynth effect per turn, only once per turn. So if you use the special summon effect, you cannot use the bounce effect from the graveyard, so very important. Alright, and as for the rest of the deck list, that's basically it. The rest of the deck has stayed the same as the previous Labrynth build, so you guys probably know what most of the cards in here do by now. There is one other new addition, being your Muckraker, which is a fairly useful card. I'm yet to use it so far, but it should come up at some point, because it basically just lets you summon back your Fiend monster from your graveyard. If a monster you control be destroyed, battle, or card effect, you can shoot one Fiend monster instead. You can target one Fiend monster in your graveyard, discard one card, and if you do, special summon that monster. Or you cannot special summon monster rest this turn, except Fiend monsters. So it's just a really good way to get back some of your big boss Fiend monsters if they get put in the graveyard for whatever reason, and you're unable to bring them back via your other means. So that's another new addition, but the rest of the deck list, it's all pretty stock standard stuff. The extra deck, it's not super set in stone. You can sort of play whatever you like, as long as you're keeping some cards in here for your Dogmatika Punishment, so things like your Elder Entity Test to be able to destroy cards, your Garura to be able to draw cards, your Banishing from Graveyard through this guy. You get the picture. The rest of the extra deck, though, doesn't really matter too much. Alright guys, without further ado, let's just jump into some gameplay. Alright, let's jump into the replays. So today I've got 3 replays to share with you guys, all of which were obviously gathered in Diamond, as you can see, and I did get a nice little rank up when playtesting this deck list. Now, I didn't do too many games of testing this deck, purely because I already knew what build I was going to make, because I did a bunch of pre-testing beforehand, so it wasn't exactly very hard for me to sort of get a deck list out there and get some replays done already. So, if you're wondering about win rates or how it went with me playtesting this deck list, when playing it on ladder, I've only played, I think, 6 games with this deck so far, and in doing so, I won 5 out of the 6 games, with the only loss being a game where I activated the draw spell, the one that you can only use once per turn, and I drew into 2 more draw spells, both of which I was unable to use, because the first draw spell obviously locks you out of using the other 2, so it was one of those games where it's like, I mean, sometimes you just have really, really bad luck, and that was just one of them. The other 5 games just won really goddamn easily, and you don't really need me to tell you how good this deck list is or what the win rate was like, when it's already a guaranteed tournament-topping deck list from the TCG, the OCG, it's already a really good deck list IRL, so no matter what I show you here, you should already be convinced this deck list is good. What I'm just going to show you is a couple of examples of me just messing around in Master Duel and just making sure a couple of players have a lot of zero fun, because that's what this deck list does. As you will see, I think I actually get to do actually I won't spoil it, but I do some couple of really gross things during these replays. Alright, so I think I've got a Teal player, I've got a Xyz player, which I've already forgotten the name of the deck list, and then we've gotten the last guy, which is a mirror match actually. Alright, so we went second this one, but it wasn't really much of a going second replay because he activated this, I activated Ash Blossom, and the turn was done. So if you're wondering why we're playing Ash Blossom, by the way, in a trap deck, which is something you don't normally do that often, is because I don't want to run into things like the branded decks, because there's so many branded players on ladder right now. I feel like not playing Ash Blossom is pretty bad. It's just and it's also just a generically good card. It's not bad to run, but it's also really goddamn good against branded, so. Also, this deck does do a little bit of special summoning, so not letting your opponent have 2 draws from Maxx can also be fairly impactful. End phase, didn't do too much, but don't worry, he does actually do a bit of Telement stuff. It's just, yeah, his first turn didn't go so well. Activating my card, drawing a couple of cards, setting 4 and passing. Typical trap gameplay. Alright, summons his card, we're going to imperm that. Then we're going to activate our Big Welcome Labrynth to summon out our dude to the field. I honestly should have probably done this during the draw phase. I'm still not super used to this card yet and when I'm meant to summon out the big new boss monster. Because the advantage of summoning out the big boss monster is whenever you activate a trap card, you get to grab another trap card from deck. So if I don't get the boss monster out early, especially if my opponent's going to pass the turn, I might just miss the opportunity to get one of the trap cards. So I'm not really sure how early I'm meant to use this, so I just decided to use it now before I use one of the other trap cards. Alright, summoning out my Lovely, returning it to hand. Now, Lovely can actually summon itself back to the field at any point for the rest of this turn because I've already activated a trap card. So whenever I feel like using this. And honestly, I should have summoned it now. I should have already put it on the field. Because I end up using an Imperm here, which I can't now get the trigger effects from this card. So it's kind of a wasted Imperm. Or a wasted chance to grab a trap card. I do chain it though, but it doesn't really matter at this point. Alright. End phase, I'm going to now use my punishment. This is literally just to trigger this to grab another Labrynth card from the deck list. And he activates one of his T element Havness. This is going to mill 3 and give him a fusion summon as well. Grabbing, of course, my Welcome. Punishment, popping his card. Now, unluckily, I actually kind of hit like all of my my dudes here. So I had to go for a card draw instead, which I think I was going to go for anyway, but yeah. So now I'm going to send a copy of, wherever it is to the graveyard. You'll see in a second anyway. Oh yeah, I sent a copy of my Garura, so I get a card draw. I think, by the way, my deck is only playing one of that card. I think you should play 2 of it, just because of the chance of not hitting it off your draw. And your extra deck doesn't really matter too much anyway, so... For some reason, I think he banished it. So I don't really know about that one, sure. Alright, and he's going to fusion summon into his card and grab... Oh god, he's a great player. Summons out Kit Close. Grabs his spell card. Oh, spoiler alert, he grabs his spell card. Then proceeds to activate it in the Imperm column. And to be fair, there's a trap card here, so he probably didn't really realize that, oh, that's where an Imperm actually happened earlier. Nice. Also keep in mind this card, because it's end phase, he can't actually use its effect to mill 5, so thankfully, because we don't use any monster effects, he had to use his Havness during the end phase, so it felt pretty goddamn good. Alright, so we haven't got a whole lot right now, but don't worry, because we can generate a whole lot. Activating our field spell, going to use our Welcome Labrynth. This triggers this card to grab another trap card from deck. With this, we're going to grab a copy of our Dimensional Barrier, because we're against a fusion deck, so activating this card just locks out all fusions, and he can't do anything for the rest of the turn on his next turn. Alright, going to destroy a card on the field, making sure not to destroy either of these two, because that'd be dumb. Grabbing a big Welcome for next turn. Alright, shuffling that back into the deck, using the trap card Engrave, beating over it, beating him in the face. Now the reason I decided to use the shuffle here is because if I use the shuffle during the next turn, using this card, I wouldn't, because you can only use one of these effects per turn. So if I activated this shuffle during his turn, I wouldn't be able to use this card's effect during his turn. So I decided to use it now. Honestly, I probably could have saved it and just grabbed out one of the other Labrynth trap cards rather than this one. I think that was probably better. He's going to banish, summon out. But by this point, it doesn't really matter because he knows what's about to happen. I'm going to activate Barrier. He can't fusion summon for the rest of his turn. And I'm going to grab another trap card. Now, if you can't fusion summon with this deck list, you're not playing the game anymore. Grab my Compulse. Probably should have grabbed an actual another Labrynth card here. That's fine. Yeah, he was pretty doomed. Alright, next up. And this is an example of me going first, I believe. Yeah, I probably should have gotten a better going second replay. My opponent actually setting up a lot more. But it wasn't like the T-Element play didn't do anything there. It's just he kind of got ashed on his first turn. Then we did get to set up stuff. We were already ready to sort of play the game. Oh yeah, another thing I want to mention is with Evenly Matched, a really cool interaction with Evenly, which actually came up in that one game that I showed you, that I told you guys I lost because the stupid drew into more draw cards, which you can't play anymore. That stupid game where I lost, I really wish I did draw into some good cards, because I actually had a really sick Evenly play there. We activate Evenly, banish most of their field, and then because you activate a normal trap card, if you have your lady in hand, you can just special summon it to the field, because it works off of Evenly as well, so that's a pretty cool little interaction there. Just randomly decided to bring that one up. Get drolled for some reason. I was like, okay. Happen to open this card in my opening hand, meaning because I searched for your Big Welcome, I can now activate this card, which now lets me use my trap cards during my turn they are set, or only one card, which is going to be my Big Welcome. Summon my boss monster to the field, adding it back to hand. Not going to give him a card draw here, especially considering I plan to summon twice. Once off this, add it back to hand, special summon it, just 2 summons. So, just going to Ash it. Alright, summoning my dude. Turning to hand, special summoning my dude. Gonna discard, and because we used a discard effect, or we activated a Labrynth's card effect that required a discard, we can now add this card back to our hand as well, which is why I decided to do all this stuff now. Alright, got a Clockwork, got a Labrynth, and then we're good to go. Fairly decent setup actually, as you're about to see, because we can do, when you've got your clock in hand, which you can get really commonly because this card can search it, the reason you want to get clock in hand is because of this really cool interaction, or probably the most broken part about this deck list is what you're about to see. So wait to see what my opponent's playing first, and once I know what I'm playing, I'm going to do something really gross to him. So I now know, oh, you're playing an Xyz deck. I'm going to activate my trap card, my Welcome Labrynth, activate a copy of my Silver Castle, or my Lady. Summon out a copy of my Dimensional Barrier. Now, if I knew my opponent was playing Branded, if I knew my opponent was playing Runic, if I knew my opponent was playing basically any spell card focused deck list, although this would have worked on Branded as well, but any sort of spell card focused deck list where they need some sort of spell cards to be able to play the game, I could have searched for my Eradication Virus and done the exact same thing to them and nuked every spell card in their hand. But what you're about to see here is I just grab my Dimensional Barrier, I can activate my Clockwork, and activate this card, and all of a sudden, no Fusion summons for his turn. He can't, or no Xyz summons for his turn, and he won't be able to play. Alright, summon out my dude. Activate my clock. Activate my trap card, and now he can't Xyz summon with his Xyz deck. Alright, and I can even use trap cards in the graveyard, which normally you don't want to use things in your grave that would move cards, because that would trigger these cards' effects. But I can actually do so, because he can't Xyz summon this turn. So I'm just going to use this, pop some of his cards, and in doing so, we'll trigger all of the effects of these 2 monsters on the field. So I get a card draw, get to remove a card from his hand, and I get to add back a copy of this card, I believe, as well. Oh no, I get to add this card back, I believe. But I think my opponent concedes before I get to Duel, sorry. Yes, I had a third effect that was going to go off too, but he conceded, obviously. So that's mostly what this deck does. It's just a removal deck, or if you happen to get into a perfect combination of your furniture, you can basically just make it so you lock your opponent out of play in the game by specifically searching the floodgate that will win you the game in whatever situation. Yeah, I think there's also a lot of merit in this deck list for playing the other Eradication Virus. It's good against specifically Sprite, because it destroys all monsters that are like 1,400 less attack. So that's also another card you could run in here, because all these cards are searchable. This card is absolutely gross. Alright, so this replay is going to be a very unique one that I think you guys are going to enjoy. It's a mirror match, but I'm going second. So my opponent's going to activate this card's effect, sending his thing, sending his card to the field. Setting 2 and trying to pass. But you notice that I can actually now summon this card to the field because my opponent has activated a Labrynth effect. Yeah, if a Labrynth card or effect is activated, I can actually summon my card to the field. I could also have activated my own Labrynth effect, by the way. So there's a lot of stuff you can do during your opponent's turn with this deck list. If you open this card and your Stove, because you could use your Stove, that's a Labrynth effect. You can summon your Lady to the field. My opponent's actually playing Labrynth and used a Labrynth effect, so we can do so. Alright, now I'm going to activate my Stove. Discarding a trap card, which happens to be, by the way, Big Welcome, which is a card that, as you guys know, in the graveyard, I can banish it to remove my opponent's cards. And I've got my set card here. And so my Big Welcome, we saw where he placed his thing, so we can just remove it. Pass back to me, and I think before I even get to play the game, he concedes. But I just wanted to show you how this deck list can actually do some stuff during your opponent's turn now, because it's actually like, some of these cards are actually hand traps now, which is pretty disgusting, but mostly you're not going to be doing that all that often, so I just wanted to show this sort of unique-ish replay to you guys. Alright, that's going to do it for today's replays. Hope you guys enjoyed them. If you did, remember to leave a like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. I do have Dark World planned tomorrow, so if you want to see my Dark World build, remember to subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, hope to see you guys in the next one. Laters.
Hey, big brother, can I watch SpongeBob?
Shut up, Mokuba. I'm busy flagging YouTube videos to compensate for the fact that I have an extremely small penis.
Oh.